Okay? And also in the chemtrails, and there's a link directly that Jeff Rentz has found out, and I'm going to have Dr. Staninger and Dr. Carjou on in about a week on my radio show. And I've done some investigations, and there's very solid evidence now that Morgellons is caused by a silicon-based nanomachine life form that does not originate on planet Earth. Is that not interesting? This is a silicon-based life form that is intelligent like bees or ants, and it fights back. Conversion of the atmosphere into a plasma for weather modification, geotectonic warfare, scalar mind control technologies, the woodpecker, which has been discovered back in the 70s, HARP, the Tetra system in the United Kingdom, Gwen towers in the United States, and the Iridium satellite system connected to the cell towers and the smart highways is all based on not only sending out a signal to track you, but Nokia, which is one of the leading cell companies, has figured out a new way to cut down the need for increasing the amount of signal by 3 to 5 times as many cell phones in the same signal area by beaming the signal directly to you. But they can also, besides the cell signal, they can actually have a biocoded signal to your DNA to affect your physiology and insert thoughts into your mind. And they have this technology today. And Nokia is directly involved. If you go to these cell phone companies, either Bell Laboratories or you go over to Nokia over there in Helsinki, what you'll find is that these are highly classified, and you have NSA agents, and above government technology, top secret and above top secret, all over the place. This is not a place for making cell phones. It is a place for dialing up your cortex. Force 5 hurricanes and cyclones. Of course, a hurricane is in the northern hemisphere, a cyclone is in the far east and south. And why are they happening? Well, they're happening for several reasons, which is why we're going to talk about some of the other talks later if we have time. And I'm sure I'm a little long-winded, but I hope everybody can last tonight. First off, what's happening is I researched this very extensively. The Planet X phenomenon, or Planet 10, is not an imagination. This is real. We're also about to, our solar system is rotating around the galaxy, and we're transitioning across what's called the precession of the equinoxes across the galactic plane, where we're entering what's called a proton energy field, which they know about. They're very aware of this. This proton energy field is not only a rent in our area, but it's also a rent in hyperdimensional space. So it's an area where transdimensional entities can enter through what's called a stargate. And they're very aware of this. That's why they have all these stargate projects. And that's why there's a lot of strange and crazy things happening. The reason for the global warming is caused by two phenomena. One, the polar ice caps are melting on Mars. There's superstorms on Jupiter and on Io and these other moons where there's changes in the geotectonics, etc. It's caused by the sun because the solar system is a Tesla wheel, if you know what a Tesla wheel, and there's discharges occurring because there's a hypergravitational object approaching from us at great distances that are probably 50 diameters of the solar system at a very, very rapid pace. In fact, the calculations done by scientists like Dr. McKenney have estimated that as it approaches past the former planet Pluto, which is now replaced by the planet Eros, which means the goddess of chaos, is the new planet, by the way. Does anybody know that the new planet's name is Eros, the goddess of chaos? Well, in fact, if you look at the heating, we have 90% of the glaciers are not melting, 10% are staying the same, 80% are actually increasing, 10% are melting, and the polar ice shelf is melting in areas near the Decalcify chain, which is a huge volcanic chain under the water that's 3.5 to 5 miles down across the Arctic Ocean, and another chain across the Tierra del Fuego area and across just one area of the shelf. And they want to point to these areas because the volcanism is increasing at the bottom of the oceans where the water is 500 to 700 degrees. These hyper compressed waters and incredible atmospheric pressures are heating the oceans, and the oceans are turning over, which is why we have El Nino and La Nina right now, and why the weather is acting so weird on the west coast and the east coast, and why you guys are getting clobbered on the west coast. We were clobbered last year on the east. And when they have fools like the Al Gore, who says the inconvenient truth, what it really is, it's a very convenient lie, because their plan is to reduce and control the remaining population on the planet without warning us of the devastation to coastal areas, the release of super calderas like the one in Yellowstone National Park, and the explosion of massive volcanic activity that could break off the Hawaiian volcanic shelf, which could create a tsunami half a mile high hitting the west coast of the United States at 740 miles per hour and going all the way to the west slope of the Rockies. And this has been already worked out in laboratories like the laboratories in Zurich, Switzerland, where the massive earthquakes that might occur off the Canary Islands may actually create a wave as high as 300 meters or 90 stories high that would hit the east coast of the United States and North and South America, going in 1 to 300 miles and traveling at 540 miles an hour. But you guys on the west coast have got something much bigger in store for you if the Hawaiian volcanic activity occurs, which is occurring in the Ring of Fire. Populations that are very familiar with, like the Japanese population, and know about volcanism and know about cataclysm, it's not just their scientists telling them, it's their spirits telling them that something is coming, because we really have everything lined up precisely like before the Great War between Atlantis and Lemuria, with the exact same population types, the exact same technologies, and the exact same geopolitics. Isn't that a coincidence that we're in the same position on the precision of the equinoxes and the cycles? There was just a tornado today in London. Did anybody hear about that? December 7th? There was a tornado in London, and it caused quite a bit of damage. London, England. Have you ever heard of tornadoes in London? No. Loss of the escalator effect. There's been a 30 to 35% decrease in the Gulf Stream, bringing warm waters from the Gulf of Mexico to North Europe. They're not heading toward global warming. They're heading to an ice age. An ice age is not caused by cooling. It's caused by increased rainfall. Has anybody noticed that in some areas of the world the rainfall has really gone up a lot, and other areas are desertifying? That rainfall in the northern hemispheres will cause snows that could pack up to 100 feet of snow per year. They calculated out that in the last ice age, there was equivalent of 100 feet of snow packed down per year in order to create the thickness of 2,000 to 4,000 feet of solid ice before the last ice age ended. And these ice ages, by the way, come in very quickly, in as little as 3 to 5 years. It doesn't mean that it's the end of civilization, but it means lots of places are not very habitable because you're under a few thousand feet of ice. Most of North Europe would become under a massive sheet of ice. Most of Canada would be covered under a massive sheet of ice. There may well be also a pole shift, which may occur with this, because it has occurred before. In fact, they've calculated out, this may not be common knowledge, but the North Pole used to exist 500,000 years ago near North Bay, Ontario. So Santa's place actually is in North Bay, Ontario. He just had his real estate moved. People need to know that the actual crust of the Earth moves on the magma shield, and there's actually a rotation of the north-south poles, and you can actually see it from rock deposits. This is science, showing the changes in geometric lines in rock deposits and volcanic ash and so on, showing that the cataclysms are not an anomaly, but is the basic structure not only of our planet, but of most planetary systems in our solar system, where 76% of all of the planets in our known galaxy are binary, and 16% are trinary, meaning they have at least 3 sun-like objects, either a dwarf star or smaller stars. In fact, the planet Jupiter is not a planet, but it's a star, because Jupiter gives off more heat and light and radiation than it absorbs. Therefore, by definition, it's a star. And any hyperdimensional object, a high-density object that could be ignited into a star or was a star, is by definition a dwarf star. This planet X is not a planet by any means. It's a hyper-dense object that by definition is a probable aborted or dwarf star. So we probably have a trinary star system with a play, press, and reset button to civilization. And we're about to have the button pressed on us. Tsunamis and Yellowstone super caldera are coming. Now, I can't tell you when, but the thing that will trigger it off is the approach of a hyperdense object. Now, why are they building underground bases at an enormous pace? There's now somewhere almost around 1,500. And if somebody had told me this years ago, I'd say, you know, you're a nut. Don't tell me about that crap. But when you've been underground on one of them, nobody's going to argue with me anymore. I don't care. They could punch me. They could slit my throat. I don't care. I've been there. It exists. I took care of John Fiala, who is best friends with Phil Schneider. How many people know Phil Schneider? Well, they were using tunneling machines back in the mid-'90s that could tunnel a rock face at 7 miles per day, that could cut through a rock face with high-energy impact lasers that would below the nano-sized particles of rock, so there was no debris left, forming an obsidian-like core.